The world felt like it was collapsing under Caleb's feet, each step heavier than the last as he trudged up the Montana Trail, his breath fogging in the crisp morning air. He'd come to the Bitterroot Mountains to outrun the chaos of his life in Seattle. His family's rejection, the suffocating expectations, the whispers that followed him after he came out. Out here, alone, he thought he could finally breathe. The trail was steep, winding through dense pines and jagged rocks, the kind of place where you could lose yourself and not be found. Caleb, 28, with his wiry frame and a backpack stuffed with just enough to survive a week, had planned it that way. Seattle was 1,000 miles away, but the sting of his mother's words, "You're no son of mine," still burned. He adjusted his faded flannel shirt, the one he'd worn since college, and pushed forward, the crunch of gravel under his boots the only sound breaking the silence. Then, from behind, a low, warm voice cut through the stillness. "Mind if I ride with you?" Caleb froze, heart pounding. He turned to see a man on horseback, early 30s, broad-shouldered, with a face weathered by sun and wind. His cowboy hat was tilted back, revealing dark eyes that held a mix of curiosity and something softer, almost vulnerable. A faint smile played on his lips, and his horse, a sturdy bay mare, snorted softly. "I'm hiking," Caleb stammered, gesturing at his boots. "No horse." The man chuckled, sliding off the saddle with an ease that spoke of years in the wild. Figure of speech. "I'm Elias. Saw you out here looking like you're carrying the world. Thought you might want company." His voice was steady, but there was a weight to it, like he knew what it meant to run from something. Caleb's instinct was to say no, to keep his solitude intact. He'd come here to be alone, hadn't he? But something in Elias's gaze, open, unguarded, made him hesitate. "I'm Caleb," he said finally. "And sure, why not?" Elias tethered his horse, Daisy, to a nearby pine, and they started up the trail together. The silence between them wasn't awkward but alive, like the hum of the forest itself. Elias moved with a quiet confidence, his worn leather boots matching Caleb's pace. They talked about small things at first, the weather, the trail, the way the mountains seemed to swallow the sky. But as the hours passed, the conversation deepened. Elias spoke of growing up on a ranch in Wyoming, where being gay was a secret you buried under hard work and silence. Caleb shared fragments of his own story, his parents' rejection, the friends who'd turned away. "You ever feel like you're running from a fire, but it's still burning inside you?" Elias asked, his voice low as they paused by a stream. Caleb nodded, his throat tight. He hadn't expected to find someone who understood. By late afternoon, they reached a clearing with a view of snow-capped peaks. Elias pulled out a thermos of coffee, offering Caleb a tin mug. Their fingers brushed as Caleb took it, and a spark shot through him, electric, undeniable. He glanced at Elias, who held his gaze a moment too long, a question lingering in his eyes. "You don't strike me as the type who needs to escape," Caleb said, breaking the tension. "What's a cowboy like you doing out here alone?" Elias's smile faded slightly. "Runnin', same as you. My brother, he didn't take kindly to who I am. Said some things that cut deeper than I like to admit. Been riding these trails ever since, trying to figure out what's next." Caleb wanted to ask more, but the weight of Elias's words stopped him. Instead, he sat closer, their shoulders almost touching. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. For the first time in months, Caleb felt something other than pain. A flicker of hope, fragile but real. As night fell, they set up camp together. Elias showed Caleb how to build a fire, their hands brushing again as they arranged the kindling. The air grew colder, and they sat close, sharing stories of their pasts. Elias talked about the ranch, the way the stars looked from the open plains. Caleb spoke of Seattle's rain-soaked streets, the coffee shops where he dreamed of a different life. The fire crackled, and the distance between them shrank. "You ever think about what it'd be like to stop running?" Elias asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Caleb looked at him, the firelight dancing in Elias's eyes. "Every day," he admitted. "But it's hard to believe there's a place for people like us." Elias leaned closer, his breath warm against Caleb's cheek. "Maybe there is. Maybe we just gotta make it ourselves." The words hung between them, heavy with possibility. Caleb's heart raced, but not from fear. For the first time, he didn't feel alone. The next morning, the air was sharp with pine and frost. Caleb woke to the sound of Elias humming softly, tending to Daisy as the first light crept over the mountains. There was an ease to Elias's movements, a quiet strength that made Caleb's chest ache in a way he hadn't felt in years. They packed up camp in silence, but it was the kind of silence that felt full, not empty. As they continued up the trail, the path grew narrower, the trees denser. Caleb found himself stealing glances at Elias. His broad shoulders, the way his hands gripped the reins with quiet confidence. He wondered what it would be like to reach out, to close the distance between them. The thought scared him as much as it thrilled him. By midday, they reached a rocky outcrop overlooking a valley. The view was staggering, miles of untouched wilderness, the Bitterroot River glinting like a silver thread below. Elias dismounted, tying Daisy to a tree, and sat beside Caleb on a flat boulder. They shared a canteen of water, their fingers brushing again. This time, neither pulled away. "You're not like most city folks I've met," Elias said, his tone teasing but warm. "Most of 'em would have turned back by now." Caleb laughed, a sound that felt foreign after months of silence. "Guess I'm stubborn. Or maybe I just needed to get lost for a while." Elias's eyes softened. "Lost ain't so bad if you got someone to find you." The words hit Caleb like a punch. He wanted to lean into them, to let himself believe they could mean something. But doubt crept in, cold and familiar. What was this? A fleeting moment on a trail? Or something more? He wasn't sure he was ready to find out. Their conversation was cut short by a rustling in the trees. Elias tensed, his hand instinctively moving to the knife at his belt. Caleb's pulse quickened as a figure emerged. A park ranger, her face stern under a wide-brimmed hat. She introduced herself as Ranger Torres, mid-40s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense tone. "You two seen anyone else on this trail?" she asked, her voice clipped. "We got reports of poachers in the area. Dangerous types." Elias shook his head. "Just us and the trees, ma'am." Torres studied them for a moment, then nodded. "Stay sharp. Stick to the main trails." She handed them a map, her gaze lingering on Caleb. "You look like you're a long way from home, kid." As she disappeared down the trail, Caleb felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wind. Elias noticed, his expression darkening. "Poachers ain't no joke out here," he said. "We should keep moving." They pressed on, the mood heavier now. Elias rode ahead, scanning the forest with a vigilance Caleb hadn't noticed before. The trail wound through a dense thicket, and the air grew thick with the scent of damp earth. Caleb's mind raced, torn between the danger Torres had warned of and the pull he felt toward Elias. He wasn't used to trusting anyone, let alone a stranger he'd met less than a day ago. But Elias's presence felt like an anchor, grounding him in a way he hadn't expected. That night, they camped by a small lake, its surface mirroring the stars. Elias built the fire again, and Caleb watched, mesmerized by the way his hands moved, deliberate, steady. They sat close, the cold pressing them together. Elias pulled a blanket from his pack, draping it over both their shoulders. "You're shiverin'," he said softly, his arm brushing Caleb's. Caleb's breath caught. "I'm fine," he lied, but he didn't move away. Elias turned to him, his face half lit by the fire. "You don't have to keep it all locked up, you know? Whatever you're carrying, you can let it out." Caleb's throat tightened. He wanted to tell Elias everything. The pain, the fear, the longing for a life where he could be himself without apology. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, he leaned closer, their shoulders pressing together. Elias didn't pull away, and for a moment, the world felt small and safe, just the two of them under the endless Montana sky. The third day brought a shift in the air, thicker, heavier, like a storm was brewing. Caleb and Elias moved faster now, the ranger's warning still fresh. The trail climbed higher, the terrain growing rugged, with loose rocks and steep drops. Daisy snorted nervously, and Elias's eyes darted to the tree line more often than before. Caleb tried to focus on the path, but his thoughts kept circling back to Elias. The way he draped the blanket over them last night, the quiet strength in his voice, it stirred something in Caleb he'd buried long ago. He wasn't sure if it was hope or something more dangerous, like love. Either way, it scared him. They stopped at noon to rest, sharing a granola bar from Caleb's pack. Elias's hand lingered as he passed it back, and Caleb's heart skipped. He wanted to say something, anything, but the words caught in his throat. "You're thinking too much," Elias said, a playful edge to his voice. "I can see it in your eyes." Caleb flushed. "Maybe I'm just trying to figure you out." Elias grinned, but there was a flicker of something deeper in his expression. "Not much to figure. I'm just a guy who loves these mountains and maybe the company I'm keeping right now." The words hung between them, bold and unguarded. Caleb's pulse raced, but before he could respond, a sharp crack echoed through the trees. Elias was on his feet in an instant, his hand on his knife. Caleb scrambled up, his heart pounding. "Stay behind me," Elias whispered, his voice low and urgent. They crept forward, Daisy tethered to a tree. The sound came again, another crack, closer now. Through the trees, Caleb caught a glimpse of movement. Two men, rifles slung over their shoulders, moving stealthily. Poachers, just as Torres had warned. Elias pulled Caleb behind a boulder, their bodies pressed close. "We can't outrun him," he murmured, "but we can outsmart him. Follow my lead." Caleb nodded, his fear tempered by Elias's calm. They moved silently, skirting the trail, using the trees for cover. Elias's hand brushed Caleb's as they crouched low, a fleeting touch that grounded him. They reached a narrow ravine, the walls steep and moss-covered. Elias gestured for Caleb to climb down first, his hand steadying him as he descended. At the bottom, they paused, catching their breath. The poachers' voices carried faintly, too close for comfort. Elias's face was grim, but his eyes softened when they met Caleb's. "You okay?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Caleb nodded, though his hands shook. "Thanks to you." Elias's lips curved into a small smile. "We're in this together now." They waited until the voices faded, then climbed out of the ravine, moving quickly but quietly. By dusk, they reached a hidden meadow, the grass soft and golden in the fading light. Exhausted, they collapsed side by side, Daisy grazing nearby. The danger had passed, but the adrenaline still hummed in Caleb's veins. "You were pretty badass back there," Caleb said, his voice light but genuine. Elias laughed softly. "Just doing what I know. You held your own, city boy." They lay there, staring at the sky as it deepened to indigo. Caleb's hand rested inches from Elias's, and he felt an urge to close the gap. Instead, he spoke, his voice raw. "I've spent so long running from who I am. Out here, with you, it's the first time I felt like I could stop. Elias turned to him, his eyes searching. "You don't have to run anymore, Caleb. Not from me." The words were a lifeline, and Caleb clung to them. He reached out, his fingers brushing Elias's. This time, Elias laced their fingers together, his grip warm and steady. The world felt impossibly big and impossibly small all at once. The fourth day dawned with a quiet that felt fragile, like the calm before a storm. Caleb woke to find Elias already up, brewing coffee over a small fire. The sight of him, hat tipped back, sleeves rolled up, the morning light catching the stubble on his jaw, made Caleb's chest tighten. He wasn't sure when it had happened, but Elias had become more than a stranger. He was a possibility, a future Caleb hadn't dared to imagine. They set out early, the trail winding through a forest so dense it felt like another world. The poacher's presence lingered in their minds, but the danger seemed distant now, overshadowed by the pull between them. Caleb caught Elias watching him, his dark eyes warm and unguarded. Each glance felt like a question, one Caleb wasn't sure he was ready to answer. By midday, they reached a high ridge with a view that stole their breath. Rolling hills, distant peaks, and a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Elias dismounted, letting Daisy graze, and they sat together on the edge of the ridge, their legs dangling over the drop. The silence was comfortable, but heavy with unspoken words. "I used to come up here as a kid," Elias said, his voice soft. "Whenever things got bad at home, I'd ride out and just sit. Felt like the world couldn't touch me here." Caleb looked at him, the vulnerability in his words cutting deep. "What was it like, growing up, knowing you had to hide who you were?" Elias's jaw tightened. "Lonely. My dad was a hard man, didn't have much room for anything that didn't fit his idea of right. When I told my brother I was gay, he looked at me like I was a stranger. Still does." Caleb's heart ached. He reached out, resting a hand on Elias's arm. "I'm sorry. No one should have to go through that." Elias met his gaze, his eyes raw. "What about you? You said your folks didn't take it well either." Caleb swallowed, the memories sharp. "My mom said I was a disgrace. My dad just stopped talking to me. I left because I couldn't stay in a place where I wasn't wanted." Elias's hand found his, their fingers intertwining. "You're wanted here," he said, his voice steady but thick with emotion. The words broke something open in Caleb. He leaned forward, his forehead resting against Elias's, their breaths mingling. The world fell away, the mountains, the trail, the danger. There was only this moment, this man who saw him, truly saw him, and didn't turn away. Their lips met, tentative at first, then deeper, a kiss that felt like a promise. Caleb's hands found Elias's face, rough with stubble, and Elias pulled him closer, his arms strong and sure. When they parted, breathless, Elias's smile was soft, almost shy. "Well, damn," he murmured. "Didn't see that comin' when I asked to ride with you." Caleb laughed, the sound bright and free. "Me neither." They stayed there, wrapped in each other, until the sun began to sink. But the moment was shattered by a distant shout. Elias tensed, pulling Caleb to his feet. Through the trees they saw them, the poachers closer now, their rifles glinting in the fading light. "We gotta move," Elias said, his voice urgent. He grabbed Daisy's reins, and they scrambled down the ridge, the trail narrowing dangerously. Caleb's heart pounded, fear and adrenaline mixing with the warmth of Elias's hand in his. They found shelter in a shallow cave, the entrance hidden by vines. Inside, they crouched low, Daisy pressed close. The poachers' voices grew louder, then faded, but the danger wasn't gone. Elias's hand stayed on Caleb's, a silent reassurance. "We'll get through this," Elias whispered. "Together." Caleb nodded, his fear tempered by the certainty in Elias's voice. For the first time, he believed it. The final morning broke with a clarity that felt almost sacred. Caleb and Elias emerged from the cave, the forest quiet except for the soft rustle of leaves. The poachers were gone, at least for now, but the weight of their presence lingered. Caleb felt it, but he also felt something stronger. The bond he and Elias had forged, fragile but unbreakable. They decided to head back down the trail toward safety, toward whatever came next. Daisy walked between them, her steps steady, as if she sensed the shift in their journey. Caleb and Elias moved closer now, their hands brushing with every step, no longer hesitant. As they descended, Elias spoke, his voice soft but sure. "I don't know what happens when we leave this trail, Caleb. But I know I don't want it to end here." Caleb's heart swelled. "Me neither," he said. "I came out here to escape, but I think I found something worth staying for." Elias stopped, turning to face him. The trail was quiet, the mountains stretching endlessly around them. "Then let's make a place for us," he said. "Somewhere we don't have to hide." Caleb nodded, tears stinging his eyes. Together, they reached the trailhead by midday, the world opening up before them. Ranger Torres was there, waiting with a knowing smile. "Looks like you two made it out in one piece," she said, her eyes flicking between them. "Stay safe out there." They thanked her, then stood together, Daisy grazing nearby. The future was uncertain. Families to face, lives to rebuild. But for the first time, Caleb wasn't afraid. He had Elias, and that was enough. As they walked toward the horizon, hand in hand, the mountains stood silent, witnesses to a love that had found its way against all odds. They weren't running anymore. They were building something new, something theirs,